What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cloudology channel. I don't know how good my internet connection is because StreamYard says it is not great, but we're gonna continue along. So today we're gonna be talking about cloud certification paths. Right? Do you need them? What are they? What do the different certifications mean? What route do I take to get to what my end goal is going to be? So I wanted to bring this up because there was someone that actually brought it up to me. He asked me that question on Telegram, so I gave him an answer. But I want to explain this in depth for all three cloud platforms in case you guys want to know. And then I'll kind of go into my opinion, like what do I think about cloud certifications? What do I how do you get there? How do you prepare yourself to take these exams and stuff like that? So first thing I'm going to talk about is AWS certifications, right? That's probably the most common one that most people are going to do is AWS. And they're kind of the industry standard. They have been for a number of years, and they're probably going to be into the future. So with that being said, let's take a look at the cloud certifications here. So all cloud certifications have three or four different levels, right? So AWS in this case has four different levels. They have a foundational, which essentially is your base level. I've never even heard of the cloud before type of course, right? And then you have associate, which is like all right, I've worked with the cloud for a little bit. I think the time frame they give is like six or more months. And that's kind of like you're looking to expand your knowledge in a field you're already working in, or potentially you've already are familiar with some of the technologies and services in cloud. So basically what you're trying to do is expand your knowledge even farther. And then you have professional, which is, you've been working in the cloud for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, I would say. And then you have your specialty category, which is where you're trying to learn something very specific involving, the certain cloud platform. So let me give a brief overview of what I know about these. I don't know very much. Granted, I'm not technically right now, I'm not certified. I've taken a lot of certification courses to get certified. However, I just never took the certification test. So let's start with AWS Cloud Practitioner. So from what I've gathered from this course, the overall idea of that is like, you've never seen AWS before, and literally it kind of walks you through the console and how basically explains how services work or what services there are, some commonly used services. It's not super in depth. It's really service level when it comes to like just what the services are, not necessarily how to use them in certain contexts. I would kind of attribute that certification to people who are not necessarily like super technical, maybe like a project manager or, maybe like a business analyst, for example. If they just want to know what AWS services there are and how they're used, that's probably a good one. Christian Soto, 123, my number one fan in the chat. Good evening, mate. Good evening. Good evening indeed. Thank you, Christian. So the next step up is you have associate level certifications. So you have solutions architect, the associate level, which in my opinion, that is geared towards like our job field. So like cloud engineers, DevOps, cloud, someone who works in the cloud and builds things in the cloud professionally or is looking to do that, right? And then you have two different certification tests for the associate level, which is SysOps Administrator Associate, which is more on the, I would say the operations side. And what is the operations side? That's kind of like how virtual machines are kind of managed. You can kind of think of it like a systems admin, which is exactly what it is, just on the cloud side of things, right? So it's like, managing virtual machines and managing certain services, not necessarily like building on them, but more of like a how do I manage all of this stuff in the infrastructure that I have? Whereas like the solutions architect is more of how do I build this in a way that makes sense or build this in a way that is optimal. And then you have AWS developer associate, which is if you're a software developer and you're looking to build on the cloud, these are some resources and services you can use, and it can show you how to basically develop in a cloud environment. That's the gist of what is going on there. And then you have the professional level certificates, which I don't think this is all of them. I think this is only two of the like main ones. And then you have solutions architect professional, which is just an expansion on the associate level certification. And essentially, it's more from a higher level, like best practice, probably more than best practices. Again, I've never taken the solutions architect professional exam, right? This is more for like project leads, for example, or cloud engineering managers or DevOps engineer, like lead DevOps engineer or something like that. Basically, someone that's going to do the planning of the entire project from scratch, essentially. That's the kind of level of proficiency. I would probably say over 5 years, 3 to 5 years of experience for to kind of shoot for that level. And then you have DevOps engineer, which actually is my first time hearing of this. So I imagine what it is because DevOps basically means you're doing some of the development work and you're also doing some of the operations work. So you're doing some of the management and you're also doing a little bit of development. So not necessarily development as in like software development, more so on the side of like developing new cloud tools or developing new internal processes to improve your cloud infrastructure. And then on the ops side, it's mostly maintaining what you have and making what you have more efficient. And DevOps engineer is kind of a mix between both, and you're kind of doing both at the same time or like rotate back and forth. So that's kind of a common I guess a common position. You're going to be doing both. You're going to be doing, if you're a DevOps engineer, you're going to be doing some maintenance and you're going to be doing some new building and kind of forging a path to basically optimize and build new stuff for your cloud environment, right? So those are some base level up to advanced level certifications for AWS. And then you have like specialties. So if you really want to get good at networking, like you have your advanced networking. If you want to get good at security and like securing your cloud environment, again, you have a certification for that. If you want to do machine learning or learn Alexa or data analytics or specifically do well in database expertise, if you're a DBA, database administrator, that's probably something you'd want to take. So with that being said, AWS, GCP and Azure, I'm going to pull up the charts here in a second. I actually have the same sort of certification path for both of those, but you're going to see a very common theme among the different cloud providers is that they're pretty much all the same. Like they all do the same thing. I think Google is probably the most confusing one to understand how it works. So that being said, I will bring Google into play. And so here we have, again, looks pretty familiar to what AWS has, right? So you have the cloud digital leader, which essentially is I've never seen the cloud before. I want to know what services they have. And here's a course to show you that. Yes, they have courses about that. Granted, that's meant for more like non-technical type of people. Or if you're like really like, if you're a developer and you've never worked in the cloud or even looked into the cloud at all, maybe it might behoove you to take that, at least a certification course. You don't necessarily have to take the cert because honestly, they don't hold a ton of weight unless you're like maybe a web developer, for example. But if you're a cloud engineer, it's kind of like, all right, so you kind of did the bare minimum, you know what I mean? And then you have like an associate level for a cloud engineer, which makes sense because it's the associate cloud engineer certification. Which again, that's very similar to, the associate level solutions architect for AWS. It's just for Google. And then you have the professional level certifications where You do cloud developer, which that's a more advanced um, course. I wouldn't even say more advanced. From what I understand, that is more of a like, okay, you're a software developer. Again, just like the AWS one. If you're a software developer, how do I, you know, build my applications better on the cloud or in a cloud environment? Or maybe demystify some of that, cloud stuff for a software developer. Um, and the same, the cloud architect and cloud DevOps engineer, pretty much the same as the AWS side, just for Google. So they're going to be very specific to Google, obviously. But from what I understand, a lot of this, so the cloud providers have different nuances, right? They work a little bit differently here and there, but the general idea is, for the most part, the same. So the path is pretty much the same regardless of which one you're looking at. Like I personally, I like Google, so these are some of the certs that I'm going to look into getting. But I mean, AWS is fine. Like most of the world uses AWS. Not a lot of people use Google Cloud Platform. And then they have their specialties for like data science, like a data engineer, or security engineer, machine learning, collaboration engineer. I'm not even sure what that is, to be honest with you. And then networking engineer, which would be the same as like the AWS version. So nothing revolutionary here. Pretty much the same path, right? And now what I can show you guys is my least favorite cloud ever, is Azure. So Azure, again, is Microsoft's version of the cloud. Let me expand this for you guys because I know the text is a little bit smaller. Um, Ideally, you want to start with Azure fundamentals if you don't know anything about Azure. And honestly, if you are a cloud engineer already, if you've never worked in Azure, I would probably take the Azure fundamentals. So this is the only one that I would say take the fundamentals course, because it is Azure is a different cloud platform. I know I said they're mostly all the same, but Azure has a lot of different services that don't necessarily have equivalencies to like AWS or GCP, or they're just like pretty different from those. So if you want to get involved in Azure, which don't get me wrong, people who know Azure well get paid extremely well because nobody really likes Azure. But definitely something I would look into. And I noticed Azure kind of has different fundamentals. So if you just want to learn about Azure AI, so artificial intelligence, you can go that fundamentals route, or you can do data fundamentals if you're more specifically a data engineer, or a data scientist, for example. And then you go into level 2 with the associate level. So that's where you have your Azure developer, your Azure database administrator, which I think holds a little bit more weight in the Azure world, because typically if you want to get into database administration, that is still a very like in demand field, in my opinion, for Azure, because they kind of do things the old school way. Like if a company is using Azure, they're probably a government company, and they're kind of doing stuff like in an older, maybe a little bit more antiquated way. If you work for the other cloud platforms, you kind of have to be everything, like, to be honest. But a lot of the old Azure certs or Azure positions are, they're still kind of around from the old days before cloud really existed. So then you have your Azure developer, which is the same as like your GCP, your cloud developer, or your AWS developer certifications. And then you have your Azure administrator, which that I would compare to like your solutions architect, associate level, or for AWS, or your cloud engineer certification for Google, right? And then Google kind of Microsoft Azure kind of specializes a little bit more than others. So you have your security engineer path, which is kind of all encompassing with solutions architect and stuff like that, right? So, and then you can also take a complete different path and do artificial intelligence. And this doesn't pigeonhole you into a certain job. Like that's not how I look at these certifications. I kind of look at them like, okay, I need to learn this thing, so I'm going to take this certification course to understand how this thing works. That's how I use these certification courses. I don't actually take the test. I will in the future, as I find time to do it. I've had a very busy schedule lately, but the thing that's a little bit different with Azure is you have a whole data side of the house where they have a lot more data science oriented um, fields or data special areas of expertise, if you will. And then, of course, you have the expert level, which is solutions architect, which in any cloud platform, an architect at the highest level, that's pretty much going to be your guy with the most experience or a very large amount of experience and has been working in that area for a couple of years. And then, of course, your DevOps engineer, which Azure apparently considers expert level. Well, I think they all did actually. But again, DevOps engineer between Azure, AWS, and GCP, they're kind of all the same. So if you've ever wondered, like, what path should I take for some of this stuff, reference this video. If any of your friends, like, are asking you the same question, you can point them to this video. But to kind of conclude this video, I'm going to give you my opinion on certifications. Also, resources and where you can go to learn these certifications without just like taking the test. Because you're probably thinking like, okay, I can go take the certification test, but how do I learn the test? Are there courses that help me do this? And yes, there are. There are actually quite a lot that are very good in my opinion, and they're very directed. They're very specific. So I guess I will share that with you guys, and I'll actually put these links in the description too. So my favorite resource for AWS is for sure A Cloud Guru, and you can do all your certifications through them. Um, but for AWS, I think they're the most like direct path straight into like, okay, this is the coursework to pass this exam. And, they have a bunch of hands-on labs that you can do. And this isn't a plug. I'm not sponsored by A Cloud Guru. I'm not sponsored by anybody. Believe me, this channel is way too small. But I just think their platform is very good and it's very easy to use. So I would recommend A Cloud Guru, and I will put that in the description after the show. So that way you guys can just click on the link and it'll take you there. Second one, for GCP, the A Cloud Guru does have GCP specific certification courses. In my opinion, I've taken a few of the courses. They're not the greatest, but I think they're decent. They'll get you there. I prefer Coursera, so I've taken a couple courses through Coursera for GCP specifically. I just think their layout is better. They're all to reach the same end goal, right? They're not like, it's not like this one is so much better than the other one. I just like their layout a little bit better. Their labs a little bit better than A Cloud Guru. Specifically for Google, though, I haven't tried their AWS or Azure certs. I'm not going to do Azure. Like, I just don't like it. I'm sorry. But of course, both of those platforms, A Cloud Guru and Coursera, also have Azure certification courses. So pretty much anything certification related, the industry standard is kind of A Cloud Guru, and then Coursera is like an honorable mention. But in my opinion, their Google coursework is a lot better than A Cloud Guru's. It's a little bit more directed. The path is a little bit more clear to get to that end goal, right? So why would you want to get these certifications, right? Well, one, they look pretty good on your resume. Not gonna lie, like typically if you have some type of certifications in your resume, one, a recruiter is going to see that and be like, oh, this guy's certified, and they're kind of going to preference you over some other candidates, right? That's not saying that you absolutely have to get these certifications. Like I said, I don't have these certifications. I don't have any certifications whatsoever. However, I will say that the coursework to the lead up to these certifications, for example, going on A Cloud Guru and Coursera and taking these courses really does give you a good basis of information on where to start with some things. So, for example, I've been using Kubernetes for some of my personal projects just because I like Kubernetes. Like, that's just, I like messing with it. You know what I mean? I think it's interesting. I read the origin story of Kubernetes, and I thought it was very interesting how it was developed. But I basically took a course through A Cloud Guru um, years ago, probably almost 2 years ago now. And it was the Certified Kubernetes Administrator coursework. I never took the certification test, but I took the coursework to do it. And it gave me a really solid foundation and understanding of Kubernetes at the time. And then as I started working with it in the hands on labs that they had, it made a lot more sense to me. And then when I, did my own personal stuff with it, I was like, okay, well, I know how to, one, at least get started, and two, kind of like expand on it and add certain things to it. And then I kind of incorporated like Kubernetes with GCP. Again, still in the learning phase for that. Obviously, I mean, I'm in the learning phase for everything, right? But just an example is I've kind of used these certification courses through like just to gain knowledge myself. I don't necessarily like say you have to get the certification, otherwise you're not anything. You know what I mean? Like I've seen people that have a bunch of certifications but put have never built anything on the cloud platforms, so they don't really know how to use it. You know what I mean? Like they understand the theory, but the practice isn't there. And I'm a big practice guy. Like always, in my opinion, if you're unsure of whether you should, take a certification course or not, um, try it on your own. And if it's not working out, or you just don't know what you don't know, basically take one of the certification courses, just the courses, just to give you the knowledge and I guess lay the foundation for you to be able to build on top of it, right? So, and that goes with anything, whether it's software development, whether it's cloud engineering, use the resources available to get you to the next problem, basically. So put it into practice, and you will know more than the guy that has studied all of these courses, taken all these certification exams, and knows all the theory, but hasn't actually put hands on keyboard and built it. I've seen that plenty of times where all of these guys have all these certifications, and then you ask them like super simple questions like, "Hey, dude, like you're super certified. How do you do this?" And he's like, "I have no idea. I've never done that before." I'm like, dude, but you're like solutions architects, like what's like professional level. But I mean, granted, they just don't use it. They might have taken it years ago and they just haven't used it. So yeah, like, will they help your chances at getting a job and getting a higher level position? Absolutely. Some companies require them. Like, for example, a friend of mine has he works in Azure a lot, and he has to take Azure certifications in order to work on certain projects. Like some clients for consulting companies, for example, will only take engineers that are certified. So that's something to think about. You might have to take that certification just to work on that project for that client. So, it's just food for thought. But I'm no one to tell you how to do or not do something. Like if you're a very good book learner and that automatically translates to practical use to you, then absolutely do it. If it's not, then take the certification course to gain the knowledge, use it, and then you don't necessarily have to take the actual certification test, right? But with that being said, guys, I'm going to leave that decision up to you. I hope this was a little bit insightful and kind of demystifies the certification path for some of this stuff, because I know it can be confusing. It was confusing to me. People ask me this question relatively often. I mean, I got one question recently about it, so I figured I'd make a video on it. If you have any other questions, feel free to hit me up in Telegram, Instagram, whatever link you see in the description. It probably points to me. Um, if you like this content, please subscribe, like the video, and if you disagree or agree with me, type it in the comments. Peace out, guys. You guys have a great week.